I think at the end of the day, my judgment would be it was just a bridge too far.
I felt utterly spent, but it was relief more than joy, which I didn't respect, and it certainly wasn't triumphalism.
Relief that we had managed to convince the majority of Scots of our argument in an irreversible decision.
We haven't got it over the line, there's no clear path yet, but we haven't gone away, and we're not.
In May 2011, the SNP sent shockwaves across Scotland's political landscape.
The SNP has a majority of seats, and this Parliament will deliver a referendum on independence.
The result paved the way for a new chapter in Scotland's long-running debate over its constitutional future.
When we saw the overall majority, we thought it was likely that Westminster would concede the referendum. Now, it wasn't plain sailing, because obviously there was lots of blocks and tackles and nefarious activity and perfidious reasoning from Westminster. I mean, for example, they wanted 2 referendums at one stage, but through negotiations we got to a settlement.
1, 2, 3.
To an extent, the SNP had kind of broken the election machinery in Scotland. Nobody expected them to get a majority. But yes, almost as soon as we saw that there had been one, a majority achieved, yes, of course there was going to have to be a referendum on independence.
The SNP government set about achieving its chief aim.
Today the Scottish Government has published a consultation paper, Your Scotland, Your Referendum.
The official campaign for independence brought together the Greens, the SNP, the Scottish Socialists, as well as some celebrities.
It developed, particularly in the summer of 2014, into being very much a grassroots, multifarious groups of people springing up all over the place.
There was this release of huge amounts of energy, as far as I could see, and people started to try and reimagine what Scotland could be like.
For the no side, Better Together was led by the former Labour Chancellor, Alistair Darling.
The decision we make is the most important we will make in our lifetime.
There had to be quite a lot of work behind the scenes in terms of how it was going to work, because we had a coalition government in Westminster, so it was Conservative, Liberal, Democrat, but the Labour Party in Scotland still thought of Scotland as theirs. They still had, a lot of MPs there, particularly. So it was a really, a lot of egos had to be put to one side to make it happen.
In October 2012, David Cameron and Alex Salmond met here at St Andrew's House after months of negotiations between the two governments. They signed the Edinburgh Agreement, giving power to the Scottish Parliament to legislate for a referendum. The deal also handed Holyrood the decision over the timing of the vote, the franchise, and the wording of the question on the ballot paper.
As you would expect, there was a lot of attempts to gain advantage from Westminster. They wanted to set the terms of the referendum, but there was a very obvious argument. If it was going to have a referendum on independence, then it had to be born in Scotland. It had to be provided for by the Scots Parliament.
I know that David Cameron got some criticism, and there were certainly concerns, particularly from within the Conservative Party and others, about how much he gave away in that negotiation. He wanted the result to be clear, and he also didn't want the nationalists, who have always sought grievance, to be able to say that in some way this was rigged. And I think giving away so much was almost a choice, because he wanted them to have control over much of the process.
The vote was to be held on September the 18th with a single question: should Scotland be an independent country? 16 and 17-year-olds would be allowed to vote for the first time. Opinion was polarised across Scotland.
At the moment, I think it would be stay with the Union for financial reasons.
I'm proud to be Scottish, I really am. Scottish first, British second. But I can't see us going alone.
Some people say we need England for this, we need England for that, but I don't think we do.
I'd love Scotland to be independent, but I haven't actually sort of read into all the the ifs and buts about it.
The UK government published papers setting out the benefits for Scotland of being part of the Union and warning of the dangers of independence.
The saying goes, if it ain't broke, why fix it? But I say, if it ain't broke, don't break it.
The Scottish Government responded with its white paper. Scotland's future laid out a blueprint for a new state, promising a more prosperous and equal nation.
Scotland's future is now in Scotland's hands.
The Chancellor travelled to Edinburgh and unequivocally ruled out a currency union.
If Scotland walks away from the UK, it walks away from the pound.
Alex Salmond argued the pound belonged as much to Scotland as it did to England.
To be told that we have no rights to assets jointly built up is as insulting as it is demeaning.
STV secured the first live TV debate between Alex Salmond and Alistair Darling. It was a huge event. A peak audience of almost 1 million viewers watched on. And a live stream failed to cope with demand from around the world. A cross-examination section provided one of the biggest moments in the campaign.
Any 8-year-old can tell you the flag of the country, the capital of a country and its currency. Now, I presume the flag's the Saltire. I assume our capital will still be Edinburgh, but you can't tell us what currency we'll have. What's an 8-year going to make of that?
That won the night for Alistair Darling after an unexpectedly lacklustre performance from Alex Salmond.
The first debate was 56-44 for Alistair, but at that time the yes support was under 40%. So, you know, the press reported it as a big victory for no, but it didn't actually stop the yes momentum going forward.
Of all the TV debates that have happened in modern British politics, the only one that's had an impact, and I think a meaningful impact on the outcome, was that STV debate. If only weeks before such a historic decision you can't be straight with the public as to what currency people would be spending, then you don't deserve to win.
Alex Salmond recovered ground in a second head-to-head. And throughout the campaign, his deputy had been besting unionist adversaries in the Scotland Tonight studio.
You couldn't guarantee that Scotland would stay in the European Union. Oh, come on, you can hold your own, surely. You don't have to keep appealing to Rona. Come on.
That was a moment where Nicola Sturgeon's debating skills really took off, and you were already seeing why she would naturally become the leader after 2014.
The whole campaign engaged parts of the population previously disinterested in politics.
I believe there is a better way, and independence for Scotland is the way to get that.
Hundreds of thousands of pounds could have been saved on this referendum and spent on things like abolishing food banks.
I've probably shared more sort of backstage changing rooms with Nicola Sturgeon than either of us would care to remember. But yeah, I mean, it felt at the time, it felt big. It felt like Scotland was at the centre of politics for the world, not just for the UK. It was big politics.
Scotland, land of bagpipes and Braveheart.
Things are a wee bit nervous across the Atlantic tonight.
The debate made headlines around the world.
Voters deciding if the country will separate from the United Kingdom.
As polling day drew closer, campaigning here intensified.
Inspector, I've done nothing wrong. I've done nothing wrong.
But amid the jostling and frayed tempers on the streets,
I got used to people throwing things at me.
There were some lighter moments too.
And you had to just keep a sharp eye on what was happening in the crowd. And I saw a man go into Tesco while I was speaking, and he'd been in the crowd, and he came back out with a 12-pack of toilet roll. But he put it at the bottom of iron brew crates and said, "Big man, that's for you at the end of this meeting, because you've been talking shite all afternoon."
Less than 2 weeks before the vote, a Sunday Times poll put support for yes in the lead for the first time.
Obviously, we're delighted. It was the first poll of the campaign showing yes in the lead, so clearly it was a big boost. But to be fair to them, they looked at that poll and suddenly realised they were in danger of losing and regrouped their campaign around what was called the vow, which was basically a soft option. We'll give you everything you want. We'll give you Devil Max. You don't have to risk independence. And of course, some of the people would just come across to yes, That was a pretty attractive offer.
When I saw that result, I actually fell down the stairs, so I remember it quite well. And of course, then the thinking was that's peaked too soon, because just even within that length of time, it fairly woke London up.
It re-energised the team. It gave them a sense of, OK, we're getting to the closing stages here, and we better empty everything that we've got.
The leaders of the main UK parties cancelled their appearance at Prime Minister's Questions and travelled north to campaign.
The Free Amigos jetted up to Scotland. Now, we treated that with some derision, because it was quite funny, wasn't it? But nonetheless, it did show the establishment regrouping. And perhaps, you know, if we had your time again, I might have responded a bit differently to that last week of campaigning.
I think people can feel it's a bit like a general election, that you make a decision and 5 years later you can make another decision. If you're fed up with the effing Tories, give them a kick and then maybe we'll think again. This is totally different to a general election.
Frankly, I felt by that point in the campaign that looked a bit panicky, or that they just noticed that this was about to happen because it was such a late decision, and that actually sort of all of these non-Scottish voices weren't actually that helpful, and I'd argued that that shouldn't happen, but I was overruled.
On the eve of the poll, both campaigns made their final push.
This is our opportunity of a lifetime, and we must seize it with both hands.
Let's keep our UK pound. Let's keep our UK passport. Let's keep our UK...
The country waits, our world watches. It's a night like no other we've ever witnessed.
When the counting began, the huge turnout emerged, reaching 84.5%.
No, 19,000.
When that result came through, I sat down and wrote a concession speech. Then we went down to Edinburgh and I made the concession speech. Now, obviously, you waited till the other results came in, obviously. You didn't concede before it was mathematically impossible. I think in my heart, I thought, you know, Scotland will likely follow Clackmannan once again.
I accept that verdict of the people, and I call on all of Scotland to follow suit in accepting the democratic verdict of the people of Scotland.
In the early hours of the 19th of September, victory was confirmed for the no side.
The people of Scotland have spoken.
I think I felt relieved. I felt utterly spent, but it was relief more than joy, which I didn't respect, and it certainly wasn't triumphalism.
Relief that we had managed to convince the majority of Scots of our argument in an irreversible decision.
If we'd fought the absolute perfect campaign, you know, from 30% right through for 2 years, you know, then I think, you know, could we have won? Perhaps. But of course, you never fight a perfect campaign. And I think at the end of the day, my judgment would be it was just a bridge too far.
I did feel gutted, and then you do feel that this is playing into a classic Scottish trope, you know, of the many times that people have nearly made big changes in this country and just not quite. It's not a protest vote against any particular government. This is just a deep-seated belief that Scotland was a different country with a different political outlook. We haven't got it over the line. There's no clear path yet, but we haven't gone away, and we're not.
A decade on from the vote to remain part of the United Kingdom, questions around Scotland's constitutional future continue to colour the political debate here. However, the UK government is refusing to budge on granting the power to hold another referendum. And the Supreme Court has ruled that Holyrood can't legislate without Westminster's consent. And with the once formidable electoral might of the SNP taking a drubbing in July's general election, the prospect of a second independence referendum has slipped right down the political agenda.